Welcome, friends, to a Forensic Friday late night edition of Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. Guys and girls, you know the drill. If you like all things true crime related from the police detective's perspective, please consider hitting the subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you'll get all things DutyRon and Ed Wallace when we go live or upload another video. Hey, tonight we have a real treat for you. We have a forensic pathologist joining us tonight, and we're going to go over a lot of things, and it's just going to be a great learning educational evening on a Friday night. We're going to talk about Bryan Kohberger, the Idaho 4, with a live Q&A with our forensic pathologist, Dr. Eason. Now, Eason is his last name, not Easton. We're going to get into that with him because he's been fielding and trying to get rid of that T his whole entire adult life, and maybe even when he was in high school. But we're going to get into that in a few minutes when we introduce the great doctor. But I want to say a special thank you to you, the Patreon supporters, the channel members, and all the folks who positively engage here. You guys are what makes this a great place, with your questions, with your comments, the replay viewers, the folks who moderate for us. We appreciate you guys tremendously, because without you, we have nothing here. So it's a two-way street. You ask the questions, we get the experts, and we answer those questions for you. And again, tonight we're going to go over the outline of what a forensic pathologist, what a medical examiner does in the autopsy room when he's presented, he or she is presented with 4 victims that were murdered via stab wounds by knife. Again, if you suffer from any PTSD or any type of stress or anxiety, and this type of conversation might be a little bit triggering for you, I'm going to give that trigger warning. So if the mods could please put that in there, trigger warning. We're going to talk about sensitive topics here tonight, sensitive subject. It's not for the squeamish. It's not for the folks who, again, are going through anything PTSD-wise. This may trigger it. So, again, I just want to put that warning out there to you folks. Before we introduce our esteemed guest, I want to show a little piece from the Spokane, Washington's coroner's office. This is the office that handled the autopsies of our 4 victims, Zana, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison. They were contracted by the Moscow, Latah County, they contract out all of their medical examiner work to Spokane. So we're going to watch a little video from their office and look at the technology that they have available to them, and we'll be back with you guys in a moment.
The primary responsibility of the medical examiner's office is to investigate deaths occurring in Spokane County that are of public health or public safety interest. So that includes deaths that are due to violence or injury, deaths where drugs may have played a role, and deaths in which the person was young, they were in seemingly good health, and we don't have a good reason for their death. Also, if somebody dies in Spokane County and they are unidentified, or their family has not been found and notified of their death, the medical examiner office will take the responsibility of safeguarding their remains while we continue to work on getting them identified and finding their next of kin so that we can let them know about the death. Now we have a lot of space here in this facility, and that's a benefit to the community and to the region. It's a really nice space for education and for training. We have sufficient storage capacity that we can support the community and the region. We also contract with 13 other counties in the region, so Eastern Washington and Northern Idaho, and we offer forensic medical expertise to them. We have a room also that is purpose-built for tissue procurement, for tissue donation. Autopsies provide important information that's used in criminal investigations, and medical examiners provide expert testimony in criminal trials. Those are probably the better known benefits that the medical examiner's office provides. But the medical examiner work also provides information on what drugs are circulating in our community, who's overdosing on those drugs, where are fatal car crashes occurring, and what factors are involved in those crashes, how frequently community members are committing suicide, Who among us is dying because of lack of medical care or lack of adequate housing? We have a lot of highly trained, highly skilled people working here. The office as a whole is accredited by the National Association of Medical Examiners. It is one of less than 100 out of 2,300 offices that do death investigation that has such an accreditation. Understanding how and why people are dying in our community helps us understand how people are living in our community and provide a framework for us to look at ways that people can live better and hopefully longer lives in Spokane County.
So there you have it, folks. I wanted to set that up for you so you could get a little bit of an idea of the facility where these autopsies were performed. So without further ado, joining us tonight is a great friend of Crime Time with DutyRon, Dr. Eric Eason. Yeah, Eason, not Easton. I keep catching myself. My goodness. Doc, thank you so much for taking out your time on a Friday night. I wanted to just say thank you on behalf of all of the viewers of Crime Time with DutyRon and myself and Ed Wallace. Thank you for taking out the time, Doc, to be here with us.
Thank you.
Hey, I wanted to read quickly your bio. He was kind enough to send me over. I asked Dr. Eason was born and raised in Charleston, South Carolina. He attended and graduated Clemson University. Go Tigers. There you go. He also attended the Medical University of South Carolina, MUSC. He trained in pathology at MUSC and received his forensic pathology training also in Atlanta, Georgia at the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. Dr. Eason also worked as a medical examiner for the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, the GBI as we all know it, and also was the medical examiner or worked in the medical examiner's office in Chicago at Cook County. Now that's a very busy area. It's just like New York City, Chicago, Illinois. They say next to New York City, it's a second runner-up to some of the deaths and murders in Illinois there. Dr. Eason is also currently working as a locum tenens. Am I saying that right?
Tenens.
Tenens.
Locum tenens.
I have like kind of dark lighting in here. So he's currently working as a forensic pathologist while providing expert witness consultations. So he, he's going to, be available to consult and be called as an expert witness in trials. He also has conducted approximately 4,000 postmortem examinations. Most of them are autopsies, have been autopsies. He also has extensive experience with sharp force injuries. And that's one of the things that stood out to me, because what we're about to talk about tonight involves just that, sharp force injuries, injuries with fixed blades and so forth. He's also has a special interest in sudden unexpected infant deaths that remain unexplained after postmortem exams. So I think what he's referring to there is the sudden infant death syndrome, correct?
Yes.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not well versed in this doctor stuff, But yes, that's fascinating as well, because as a New York City police officer, I unfortunately did respond to quite a bit of those sudden infant death syndrome cases, and they were so difficult. Anything that involved a child,
Right.
it really hits you hard in the heart. If you don't mind, I know I didn't do the greatest job, but if you could just give the folks just a little bit of your background and so forth. I know some of it will be repeating, but I think it might sound better if you do it.
Sure. So college at Clemson, graduated in 1994, received my medical degree from MUSC, Medical University of South Carolina. That was in 1998. I actually did a year of family medicine in Columbia, South Carolina at USC. But during that year, I kind of realized that clinical medicine was not for me. So I transferred out, went back to Charleston, completed my general pathology training. It's called anatomic and clinical pathology training. And while I was down there, took an interest in the subspecialty of forensic pathology, and did quite a few forensic autopsies down here in Charleston. This is back from between like 1999 and 2003. And then I applied for the Forensic Pathology Fellowship in Atlanta and moved to Atlanta in 2003. It's a 1-year fellowship training. Did lots of autopsies there under Dr. Randy Hanslick, and then landed my first job at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. That was in 2004. Did quite a few autopsies during my 7 years there, and then a job opened up in Chicago, and kind of wanted to change, so I moved up there in 2013. Worked for Cook County. That was a great job as well. COVID hit in 2020, and things just got out of hand, and I had to get out and come back home. And so now I'm back home and started my own business. It's an LLC where I provide consultation services, locum tenens. It's actually a Latin term. It just means that I kind of work temporarily whenever somebody needs me. And so there are times where I fly back up to Illinois, and I still have a license up there, and work for various coroners up there. I work for some of the coroners down here in South Carolina, and I'm probably going to try and get licenses in different states and kind of travel around and be like a traveling pathologist. And then I'm also available for like expert witness testimony. Somebody wants me to review a case and provide my own opinion on it, I will do that. And something else I've been doing is called surrogate expert witness testimony. I don't want to say it's a new thing, but it's something that I've just kind of started to pick up. So there's a pathologist in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, who is elderly and actually got COVID in 2021, and he can no longer testify. So all of his old cases that he autopsied prior to that, I'm called up to Horry County in South Carolina and will testify on his behalf as a surrogate. And so I just take his autopsy report and his photographs and present it to a jury. And it's pretty fun. I get to see how other people do autopsies, and I take no responsibility for any mistakes that are made in the reports, which there aren't that many, of course, but it's pretty easy to do. You know, you just, like I said, just take the photos, and, you know, as long as you come up with the same opinion, then, you know, it's pretty easy to do. Right. And so that's what I'm currently doing. I eventually may want to get back into full-time work somewhere. I'm just not sure where. I have started kind of looking around the country. There are job openings everywhere, and I'm just going to spend these next few months just kind of figuring out what the plan is. And so I'm just going to relax right now. The weather's starting to get better down here, and going to hang out by the pool for a bit while I make this decision.
Hey, Doc, that sounds like a great idea. That sounds like a real good plan.
Got some sun yesterday, as you can tell. So.
Yeah, good. So I'm glad that I asked you to do that, because I didn't cover nearly half of that, what you just mentioned. And, you know, our audience has a great interest in this Idaho quadruple murder. These young students were brutally slain on November 13th, and now fast forward, here we are in the middle of February. We have a gag order. There's going to be no interviews with the police chief like we were getting on a regular basis. There's no information coming from the defense or prosecutor, obviously, and so there's not really a lot of information. And as a matter of fact, Doctor, there's more misinformation that's coming out than real bona fide information. And one of the primary reasons I reached out to you is because I wanted somebody like yourself, a forensic pathologist, somebody who worked as a medical examiner and conducted this 4,000 postmortem exams. And you know, who better to ask these questions? But I wanted to play a little piece of the coroner. And I'm going to get you to, if you don't mind, explain to our audience the difference between a coroner and a medical examiner after we put you back on. This is Kathy Mabbitt. She is the Latah County coroner. She's 16 years in this position. She's an RN and also an attorney. So her experience is many years, but she is not the equivalent of a doctor. She does not have the qualifications, obviously, that a medical examiner would have. But let's take a listen to what she said early on. This is an interview with Banfield, and she talks about the injuries and so forth. And
early in the morning,
she gets into
so
hold on a second.
It seems like
all right. Here we go. We got it set up, Doc. Bear with me here. I'm horrible with technology, but I try to make it happen. All right, here we go.
early in the morning, so it seems likely that maybe they were sleeping.
Were they found in separate areas of the house?
That hasn't been disclosed yet.
Can you tell me, when you say that they might have been sleeping, were they found in beds?
Yes.
And so can you tell me if there were multiple stab wounds per victim, or were these sort of, individual lethal stab wounds that may have been less in number, but more in lethality?
There were multiple stab wounds, yes, on them. Most of them had just like one that was the lethal. Most of them had just like one that was the lethal stab wound. Yes.
Can you describe what that one might have been?
But they were to the fatal ones were to the chest area or the upper body area.
Were there, and I only ask this because it sometimes determines what kind of a crime this was, a crime of passion, a random crime, a fight, a struggle. Was there, were any of them slashed? Were any of their necks cut? Or were these all puncture wounds?
Well, it was a pretty large knife, so it's really hard to call them puncture wounds. And they were definitely stabbings. And it has to be somebody that's pretty angry in order to stab 4 people to death. It was late at night or early in the morning.
All right, so that was just on repeat. This was early on. The murders happened on the 13th. That interview was on the 17th. So it was just a short, few days later. Again, there was no autopsies performed. There was no gag order in place, and she was put on the spot by the media. She conducted that interview and gave out quite a bit of information. Any thoughts to jump out to you, Doctor, in regards to this statement that she made here early on?
Well, as we were talking before the show, the autopsies hadn't been done yet. So I'm not really sure how she knows that the lethal stab wounds would have been to the chest. I've had cases where I'll initially look at the body and there'll be a wound to the chest, and I'm thinking that's going to be the lethal wound, but it actually turns out to be a wound to the left side of the body or the right side, or like under the armpit or something like that. So I'm not sure how she knew that. That's just kind of the initial thing that kind of sticks out to me right now.
Yeah, I thought it was unfortunate. I kind of cringed at it. I just, I kind of held back on any kind of comments about it. But
Right.
looking back on it now, I just said, that was just a bit premature. And again, people in the chat and others that have watched this program question, what's going to happen with a cross-examination by a defense attorney when
Right.
she gets put up on the stand. And that's what we think about. So,
Right.
Doctor, I wanted to, if you don't mind, if you could you tell us the difference between a medical examiner and a pathologist? And most of the time medical examiners have, they're referred to as forensic pathologists, but also medical examiners, or correct me if I'm wrong on that, but just tell the difference to the audience of what a coroner is. And then some of the coroners have much more. The coroner system is kind of flawed in America. But before I get into that, I would like you just to explain it.
Yes, so coroner and medical examiner, they're both job titles, essentially. And so a coroner, by definition, is an elected official. It's an old system. The word coroner derives from the word corona, which means crown, and coronavirus, or if you drink Corona beer, there's a crown on top of the beer bottle. That's where that word comes from. So basically back in medieval times, if a dead body was found on your property, the king would send the crowner or the coroner out to go investigate the death and charge a fee. So basically, if someone died on your property, you had to pay for it. That's probably where the body dump concept came around. I think the U.S. is probably the first country that instead decided to make a medical examiner system. A medical examiner, by definition, is a doctor, hopefully a forensic pathologist, if not, hopefully a pathologist, but sometimes there are medical examiners who are pediatricians. And they pretty much function in the same role as the coroner, and they are going to investigate the death like I said, each state is different. I think Louisiana, the coroner has to be a physician, so that's a step, in the right direction. South Carolina here, it's you just have to be 18 and have a high school diploma and take like 40 hours of training.
Yeah, some
each year.
EMTs can become coroners in certain states.
That's right. That's right. There was once a coroner here in South Carolina who was legally blind.
What?
Yeah, exactly. Well, he could win an election, so it's really all you have to do.
Freaks me out.
And then you have this third thing called forensic pathologist. And so forensic pathologist is what I do. They're a physician who conducts the autopsies and determines the cause of death. And so you can't have a situation where you have a forensic pathologist who decides to run for coroner. And so you can have that combination there. But most forensic pathologists are going to be working as medical examiners. And so that's what I did in Georgia and Cook County. Like I said, each state is different. Probably each county is different. Illinois has it set up so that Cook County, where Chicago is, has a medical examiner office. They do not have a coroner. They eliminated the coroner back in like 1976, I think it was. The rest of the counties in Illinois are coroner counties. Let's see. I kind of lost my train of thought here. But just the basic, like I said, the basic definitions between the two: coroner is elected, medical examiner not elected, and is going to be a doctor for sure.
Right, right. Yeah, and I always say to my friends and the people here in the community, if I'm ever killed, I want to be killed here, because New York City has a hell of a New York City. The medical examiner's office is badass over here in New York.
Right.
And you know what? It's probably great in other areas, but in some of these remote places, like I covered cases all over the place, but we did this Kylie Rodney case in California, and it was the girl who drove her car into a reservoir, and the whole system over there was screwy with the coroner and the medical.
Right.
It's just, people are just up in arms over it. But listen, I wanted to reel it in and ask you, please, if you could, and I know this is an open-ended question, but could you tell us what is done in an autopsy as such, where you have 4 young victims stabbed to death, sent out to the Spokane, Washington medical examiner's office? How is this autopsy done involving these 4 victims who sustained these brutal knife attacks? What do you look for? Can you determine what kind of weapon was used? Knife-specific marks, tooling marks, and there's all different kinds of conversations that go on with this. So if you could.
Yes, so I can go through just the entire process. It starts with a phone call. So somebody reports the case to the office, either the coroner office or the medical examiner office. You have an investigator there, or a deputy coroner, who's going to take the information and prepare 4 separate investigative reports: who, what, when, where, why, how, to the best of their ability. Then the bodies are going to arrive to the facility, and in stab wound cases and gunshot wound cases, they're going to all be X-rayed. For stab wound cases, that's important because sometimes a tip of the knife can break off inside the body. And so number 1, it's evidence. And number 2, it's a safety issue, because if you're doing the autopsy and you don't know there's a broken off sharp object inside the body, the autopsy technician or the pathologist can cut themselves, and that's bad. But the autopsy begins by the pathologist going down there, open the body bag, and start the external exam. And the external exam is a head to toe, height, weight, eye color, hair color, tattoos, scars, and more importantly, injuries. And if injuries are found on the body, they are going to be photographed and described and measured, and of course categorized. So you would want to distinguish whether it's a gunshot wound versus a stab wound versus a cut, etc. Then the internal exam occurs, and that's when the body is opened and the organs are removed and examined. And what you do is you correlate the injuries on the outside of the body with what you find on the inside. And then if you can, when that is complete, you can assign a cause and manner of death. If not, you will pin the case and wait for other testing to come back. But that's just kind of the...
I don't mean to interrupt, Doc, because you just said it to determine the cause and manner of death. Now, that is done by the forensic pathologist or the medical examiner and then conveyed to the coroner, because we heard Kathy Mabut say in that interview that her job was to determine cause and manner. Is that when she's
right?
gets the
That's the way
information?
her system works. So like in Cook County, it's medical examiner. So as the forensic pathologist and the medical examiner, I do the autopsy. I determine both the cause and the manner. In a coroner system, the way it usually works is the pathologist decides the cause of death and the coroner determines the manner of death.
Okay.
It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
The way it should work is they should all work together and determine, the cause and the manner of death. But it just depends on the office and how things work.
Now, is there X-rays and dental? Because I'm thinking of my experience at the World Trade Center when we would bring in. There weren't many full bodies recovered, but early on there were. And when we had the full body recoveries, it was dental. We would bring it down and do full scanning of dental X-rays, and then full body X-rays as well.
Right. They're only going to do dentals if there's a question about the identity.
Right.
So I think they knew who these 4 victims were, so they're not going to do like a full-fledged dental X-ray on these cases.
Gotcha. But X-rays of the body, would that be done?
Head to toe. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And here's another thing too. While you're doing this exam, Doc, is there any way to make a determination at looking at these wounds on the body to see what type or match up to the, I don't even know how to say it, the puncture wounds or the stabbings or the gashings? Is there any way to match it up to say, okay, the same knife was used on each of these 4 victims, or is that kind of hard to do?
Yeah, the best we can do is we use terms like consistent with or cannot be excluded. And so a stab wound is usually going to look like a line in the skin. And if it's due to a single edge blade, like a typical steak knife, or just a typical knife that we have here in the US, you're going to have one of the ends is going to be squared off, which kind of matches with the blunt end of the knife. And the other end is going to come to a point matching the sharp end. And we take measurements of the stab wounds and we will correlate them with a possible weapon, and we can say consistent with or cannot be excluded. That's usually what we do with that. But we don't ever say, yes, this is the knife that caused all these wounds, all we can just say is that it's possible.
Right. And it was
in many cases. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Doc.
Yeah, I mean, if you got a guy that's been stabbed 40 times, is it possible that one knife was used for all the wounds? Yes. Is it possible there were 40 different knives? That's true. That's possible too. And we can't figure that out.
Yeah, it's a difficult process, and a lot of people think, well, like a gunshot, right? If the same caliber, the same weapon, and there's all different types of tooling that goes through the barrel of the gun, where they could do ballistics and so forth. So that's pretty straightforward. When you have a knife, it's not as straightforward, it seems.
Right.
There was also folks who asked if during the process of your autopsy, is there a way to determine if the perpetrator was left-handed or right-handed based on what you see before you, or is that another situation that's
that's not possible? I even looked it up in the forensic textbooks today just to make sure that I was remembering things correctly. But if you just look at a stab wound, that could have easily been created with somebody who was left-handed or right-handed. I mean, there's no way to tell.
Gotcha. I wanted to move along to if I'm going too fast, you could tell me to the tox reports.
Yes.
So that's another sticking point here, because you have these 4 college students who were allegedly out partying, more than a high probability there will be alcohol in their systems if they were drinking and so forth. But when you order these tox reports, are you looking, we've learned this in other cases, some counties don't do a full workup. Is it specific things that are being looked at, or do they just go and say, all right, we need to find out everything? Because there was a whole controversy with a couple of different forensic pathologists. One really popular one, I don't want to mention his name here, but he went and said, hey, I think that it's important to make a determination on the tox reports here to see if these these students were either on any type of drugs and alcohol, and what their state of mind was before this murder took place. Were they
Right.
drugged, in a drink or in their food and so forth? All of that would be, relevant going forward.
Right. I mean, the results don't change the cause of death. I mean, if somebody was stabbed and they were on cocaine, or stabbed and they weren't on cocaine, the cause of death is stab wound of chest, and they're not going to put cocaine anywhere on the death certificate.
Right.
I think the main reason that Tox is done on homicides is to try and put the story together. So if you're trying to figure out who did this, and someone has drugs in their system, and that may lead you to think that maybe it was a drug deal that went bad, or it may help track down something like that. There was actually a time at the GBI during the was it 2008 when we had that bad recession or something like that, and we made a policy. We said on all homicides, until further notice, we're not going to run toxicology testing unless unless the case goes to court and it's requested by both the defense attorney and the prosecution, because the theory back then, and it still is now, is that, like I said, it's not going to change the cause of death.
Right. Yeah, but again, some of the folks who are following us closely, and they brought up the argument of, could this guy have gone in there and slipped him something to make him pass out and then make his job easier? But he was only in there for a short period of time.
Right.
So I just wanted to clear the air with that, because everyone is kind of, waiting on these 6 to 8 weeks of the tox reports to come back. And now we know, even if they are back, which is chances are it's already that 6 to 8 weeks has passed. If they're back, they're not going to be released to the public, because we have a perpetrator in custody, and there's an impending trial. So that's not going to, that won't be made available until the trial commences. But so as far as the autopsy process, and I know I cut that short with you, but you had, how far were you into that? Were you?
I think I got the cause of death and manner of death, if possible, and then if you can't determine it the day of autopsy, you pinned it. We know the viewers know the difference between cause of death and manner of death, correct or not?
Why don't you just go over that quickly?
Sure, yeah, because I do this in court all the time. So cause of death is what actually killed the individual. There's unlimited examples, stab wound to chest, cocaine toxicity, hypertension, etc. Manner of death, there's only 5 possibilities, and the definition is that it is the circumstances under which the death occurred. So you have natural, which is the way everybody is technically supposed to die. It's either due from old age or some type of chronic disease. Accident, in which the death is usually due to trauma or drugs, and it's an unintentional death. Suicide, in which the individual takes his own life. Homicide, in which the death was due to the actions of another individual. And then the 5th category is called undetermined, and that's where we just can't figure it out. It's usually because we've narrowed it down to 2 possible manners, and we just can't distinguish it. So a good example would be somebody who was depressed, but was also a drug user. They're found dead. They have a high level of hydrocodone in their system, but they did not leave a suicide note. Is this a suicide, or were they trying to get high? So it's accident versus suicide. And so in a case like that, we'd probably go undetermined on a case like that.
Yeah. So thank you for explaining that, because, a lot of people get caught up on it. Sleuthy is in the chat. She's one of our main sleuths. She says, we know, but the coroner doesn't. She listed manner of death as stabbing and the cause of death a homicide. And that's
it's reversed,
both written and verbally. So
okay.
Yeah, this is what we're dealing with. This is not made up stuff, because it's out there, it's on paper. And I did see that too, but again, I wanted to highlight that, because I don't want people to think that we're just ignoring them. We're having a conversation here, but we want to get as much information as we can out for you. All right, so after you're at that stage in the process, and conducting the autopsy, what else happens after that?
Let's see. So if I'm done with these cases, I dictate in the morgue. I have a digital transcription machine. I will then transmit the dictation. I will then, days later, receive the rough drafts back from the transcriptionist. I will then put them on a shelf because I have to wait for the toxicology reports to come back. Pretty much everywhere I've worked, Chicago and down here at the office in Charleston, we can't finalize the autopsy report until the tox is back, even if we know the cause of death.
How long does that take, generally speaking, in those two areas that you worked in? Because, and again, folks who are listening, this isn't for across the board, but how long did it take for you to get your tox reports back, approximately?
At least 6 weeks.
Okay, so 6 weeks.
If they're negative, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks. But if they're positive for something, it's going to take a little bit longer.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So you transcribe into your dictator, it comes and it gets put on the shelf and you're waiting for the tox. At no time before that does that get released before you get, because then it's not a complete examination. Right?
That's right. Yeah. I do not give out preliminary autopsy reports. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Yeah.
No, absolutely not. So I think that for myself, this, we pretty much covered what goes on during the examination here. I have a couple of questions for you in regards to user feedback, because now we're getting into we're in the second half of this broadcast. So I wanted to, some of these things are redundant. We answered some of them, but I had 10 questions here that, and thanks to you guys, the live chatters and the folks who went over to DutyRon.com. And some of these questions, Doc, are going to be, pinpointed towards Bryan Kohberger. This is the perpetrator. He's innocent until proven guilty in this crime. He's under arrest and he's facing trial and facing murder charges ×4. You answered this one already. This comes in from Tina in South Carolina, in your area. She said, could Bryan Kohberger have used a stun gun to incapacitate these victims? And if so, would it show during your exam?
It should. If we're talking about like a taser, tasers leave marks, bruises on the body. It's a patterned injury, and if it was used and the marks are there, they're going to find it at autopsy.
Okay, so if it was used, there would be some type of burning marks, I believe, because I've seen people who have been tased like a little red kind of marks.
Red dots. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And sometimes if it's the one with the two, it's boom, 2 little dots, and you got that. Okay, thank you for that. Can you tell during the course of your autopsy, can you tell who was killed first and the sequence? It's been said that Zanakanodal was killed last online. This comes from Wanda T in Houston, Texas. Thank you for that question, Wanda. So the question is it easy or not possible to determine the sequence of who was killed first, second, third, and fourth?
Yeah, there's nothing at autopsy that's going to help sort that out. It's the same thing with time of death. We get asked that a lot. What's the time of death in all these cases? And that's a myth that cannot be determined with any accuracy. So the best way to determine time of death is when were they last one alive, when were they found dead. They died sometime in between that, and there's nothing at autopsy that can narrow it down even further. So the same thing with this case here. The other thing that you can't determine, if these are multiple stab wound cases, which it sounds like they are, I can't tell which wound came first, second, third, or last on the body. They're all going to look the same.
Wow. Hey, I want to just pool the chat here for there's 1,200 people listening to us live, Doc. Press a 1 in the chat if you're surprised that a medical examiner cannot determine the sequence of death here. And press a 2 if you believe that they couldn't determine this. Penny Robinson already put this in the chat. Go Clemson Tigers.
Very nice.
Thank you, Penny. There you go. He's sporting it off. He's showing off.
Got my drink here.
Wow. That's awesome. All right. So a lot of number 1s coming through in the chat, Doc. I don't see any number 2s. Consistent Insomniac comes up with a number 2. She's the first to say that she thought, okay, crime on a dime. So quite a few folks, it looks like 1s are favoring the 2s. But then again, I see a lot of 2s coming in. I should do a poll just to see. But so it looks like a mixed bag of emotions here. Again, this is all about learning here on Crime Time with DutyRon. And when Ed Wallace and I, as seasoned detectives from the New York City Police Department, if we can't give you the answers that you're looking for, we go out and we reach out to the professionals like the great doctor that's here. Eric, I appreciate you taking these questions. I got a couple more if you don't mind.
Sure.
How come the murder victims give us clues to who or what happened to them during the course of an autopsy? Example, is there evidence that can be found or is commonly found under the fingernails or other places on the body?
Yes. I think, did I mention that when I was describing the external exams? I mentioned the x-rays. We examine clothing as well. There could be blood on the clothing from the assailant that we're going to, so we're going to keep the clothing and it's going to be submitted to the crime lab and they can run testing on that. And then of course the fingernail clipping is very important. This is an up close and personal type situation where, somebody's going to be trying to grab the knife or block the knife and their hands can get on the assailant and blood and tissue can get under the fingernails. And so we clip those and submit those. The other thing that's going to be collected in this case is a sexual assault kit or rape kit. And that's where swabs are inserted into the various orifices to check for DNA that may have been left behind. It's in the mouth, in the vagina, and in the rectum as well. Right. That's going to be collected.
And they early on in this case said there was no sexual component to it. And the only way that they could tell that is by conducting the sexual kit, right? The sexual exam kit. And I wanted to ask you, because another question coming down a little bit further is who does this exam or this sexual assault kit?
Depends on the office and depends on the level of training of the forensic pathologist. So when I was a fellow at Emory in Atlanta, I did all of my sexual assault kits because they told me to, and I had to become proficient in doing them. As my career has advanced, we have very good autopsy techs at the GBI and at Cook County in Chicago, and so we would kind of tag team, and I would usually collect the fingernails on the right hand, and the tech would collect them on the left hand. And we also collect hair. We'll pull hair from the victims, from the head and the pubic region, kind of as a standard, because if like hair is found on their clothing, we need to see if it matches them or if it matches the assailant. So that's another reason why we collect the clothing. But it really depends on the office. Some offices actually have forensic nurses. There are nurses that get a special forensic training, and they will actually go into the morgue with the pathologist. And as soon as the body bag is open, they'll do their thing. And as soon as the clothing comes off, and then the external exam begins. So that's a nice feature to have. I think Houston does it like that. They have forensic nurses that work there. So,
Dr. Eason, I wanted to ask you too, is in one of the questions, in one of these 10 that I have here, one of our viewers, they asked the bodies of these 4 victims or bodies of any victims that come into the medical examiner's office, they come fully clothed, right? Nothing's removed at the scene. There's evidence that's collected from around the crime scene. But
we hope.
Yeah, but hands are bagged, right? And sent to you guys. So all of that evidence is removed by the forensic pathologist or your techs that are there with you, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah, because there was a question about chain of custody. So just for the audience here, and Pierre, thank you so much for that super chat. We'll get to that in a few minutes because that throws us off a little bit here, but I'll keep that question up, Doc. So if you could just read it, and then we'll circle back to that, and we'll maybe answer that question for this person.
Cardiac arrhythmia.
Yeah, when we get back to it. So thank you for that super chat, and we'll get back on that. I'll ask the doc. So what happens is people are asking about the chain of custody. We have these 4 victims. They were transported from Moscow, Idaho, up into another state, which wasn't far. But you have your technicians. Like here in New York City, we have the medical examiner's office has their own transport van where they can put 6 or 8 or 10 human remains in there and transport them back. But in some of these smaller jurisdictions, you'll see a personal car backup or a minivan, right? In a situation like this, ideally, we'd like all 4 of these victims to be transported at one time in one vehicle straight to the medical examiner's office. Chain of custody is tremendous when it comes to the defense. They'll attack that. How many hands did these remains go through? So how important is that in the process of getting these your victims back into the medical examiner's office, handled the least amount, bagged and put in the body bags and sent out and right into your office? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, usually each office has standard procedures in place for that. And so what normally happens is the bodies are placed into the body bag with the clothing still on, the hands are going to be bagged, the body bag is closed, and there's usually a plastic seal that they will clip onto the zipper of the bag. And so that you can only break the seal, and once it's broken, you can't reattach it. So that's one way of knowing that the remains were not disturbed at all. Once the body gets in the morgue,
documented and everything at the lab there, right?
Oh yeah, the seal number. I usually put the seal number in my autopsy report, actually, and it's photographed as well. So if the seal is broken when the body arrives to the morgue, then that's going to be a problem, and that has to be investigated, of course. But I don't think that's ever happened in my career. Once the body gets into the morgue, then the chain of custody stuff is my responsibility, and so I'm just very careful to take good pictures and document the clothing. And there's a sheet that is usually filled out, a carbon copy, and inventory the jewelry as well.
So everything is documented, photographed. Is there video? Is there video taken?
No. I've been asked that before. I was in court.
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
Yeah, and they asked, why don't y'all videotape the autopsy? And we just don't. It's probably very expensive to do so, but we just take good pictures and good body diagrams, and that's how we handle stuff like that. Right.
Let's get to the question, Doc, here. So he says, what is cardiac arrhythmia? And cardio, you're going to have to read all. This is legal. This is all medical.
Right. What is cardiac arrhythmia and cardiomyopathy genetic testing? This is part of my son's autopsy. When is it usually done? Okay, so cardiac arrhythmia is just a abnormal electrical disturbance in the heart, which can cause sudden death. Cardiomyopathy is a special type of heart disease that affects the heart muscle, and there's usually genetic causes of it. So it sounds like if you have a child who has died unexpectedly or suddenly, or the death is unexplained, there's going to be further testing to see if they may have had a genetic abnormality that caused it. And that's good for the family to know, because for family planning situations, and so there may be other family members that have the gene and may need to know about that and may need to be monitored. I don't know how long it takes. It depends on the lab that is chosen and the office that did the autopsy. So, and
we send our prayers and strength to you, your family, for your loss. There's no greater loss than a child. Nobody should be burying their child. So
further information could come from the SUDC Foundation. I worked on a book with them because we said earlier I have an interest in the infant deaths, the unexplained infant deaths, and it's SUDC.org. I think it is sudden unexplained death in childhood.org. They're going to have all kinds of good information on these childhood deaths that are unexplained.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'll link that in the description.
SUDC.org.
Yeah, I'm going to link it after the live is over. I'll go back in and edit it, and I'll put that in there.
She's based in New York. The head of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever met her or not. Laura Crandall is the.
I'm going to ask Dr. I'm going to ask Barbara Butcher and see what maybe she can know. Here's a question coming in from the chat from Prayers Partners Eve, servant of God. Can Dr. Eason share if he's ever examined multiple victims, such as these 4 victims, at one site?
Yes, I've had several cases. I had a double homicide in Atlanta. There was a triple gunshot wound homicide in Chicago that I worked on. Had a homicide-suicide in Chicago where the son was psychotic and he stabbed his mother, and then I think he then shot himself. I've had several of these cases.
Wow. Yeah. Let's get to these questions. I want to complete it out. So this is one, and I think I told you about this one. This is, again, the coroner in Latah County, Kathy Mobbitt. She, it's been reported in all different news agencies that she made the notification by telephone to one of the families, and it was a 17-year-old that picked up the phone one of the victim's sisters. She told the 17-year-old about the injury sustained and went into details. Is that common practice? I mean, I'm not asking you to, critique this thing here, but like for me, we always made notifications in person in New York City. So
Right.
when possible.
Let's see. So when I was in training at MUSC during my pathology training down here, when I started first doing autopsies, I wasn't even allowed to talk to family members over the phone. So basically, if a call was received by the MUSC pathology department about a case that I had autopsied while I was in residency, they would just immediately say all information has to come from the coroner.
Right.
And I don't really know what coroners tell the next of kin, to tell you the truth. So I'm not sure what the standard practice is.
Yeah, neither am I, and that's why I never really I really never commented on it. I just said that based on my experience here, it was always had the families. We would make death notifications as police detectives in person. Right. We would never call someone and say, "Oh, your son jumped off a building, or your son was shot, or your son was in a car accident, your daughter was killed." We always made death notifications in person when possible, and it was I made many of them, and the medical examiner more times than not, they're not making those or the coroner, the medical examiner's office, they're not making that notification because it's being done by the police, generally speaking. So it just seemed odd and off-putting to me. But then again, what do I know about what goes on in Latah County? I really don't.
Each office is different. So.
Exactly. Here comes another super chat from Blue Eyed Peach. She sent in a $5, and thank you for that. Is it possible to tell the order? So she's coming in late. This is what happens, Doc. Some people just come in the middle of the show.
Right.
They don't. So I'm going to still read it off. Is it possible to tell the order of death by transfer of blood from victim to victim if the same weapon is used?
No, that's not possible. Yeah.
No. And that's a straight out no. There's no gray area. There's no possibility. No. Okay, that's
that I'm aware of.
that's a 0.0%.
Yes, right.
All right. We're getting these questions answered. We're almost done. We covered the sexual assault kit. Okay, it was reported that one of the victims had more severe wounds than the rest of the victims. This is coming in from Jim T. And he is in Atlanta, Georgia. One of the victims, it's reported, that had more severe wounds than the rest of the victims. And some had defensive wounds. Does this tell us anything? This is coming from the autopsy, that there was defensive wounds. And it's been alleged that one of the victims had possible fingers almost severed. We don't know if these are from sources now, and I don't know if nobody saw the autopsy report. This is just leaked sources and so forth. But what does that do? If those were true, those things were true, what does that tell us, Doc?
Well, so basic human nature is that if somebody's coming at you with a knife, you're going to try and grab the knife or grab the arms or the forearms or try and block the knife. So in a stab wound autopsy, we're going to pay close attention to the palms of the hands and the forearms, and look for cuts that would have been caused by the knife. In all cases, I mean, especially females, if it's like a rape situation, we're gonna look at the bottom of the feet because they may try and kick the knife away while the sexual assault is occurring. So what this indicates to me is that if there were defense wounds there, then they tried to put up a fight, tried to block the knife. The thing about defense wounds is that even if you don't see them, it doesn't mean they didn't try to put up a fight. So somebody may be coming at you with a knife and you might miss the knife, and so you're not going to end up with any wounds on your hands or forearms, but that doesn't mean you didn't try and put up a fight.
Right. Yeah. And it would be indicative of that, maybe these victims were woken out of their sleep. Maybe some of them were completely sleeping and then, got woken up. And now,
that's right.
Listen, I've had many times when I have grown children now, 30 and 27 years old, my boys. But when they were younger, my wife, sometimes there would be something going on with them. I remember I worked midnights, so sometimes I'd be sleeping. She'd wake me up out of a sleep, and I'm just what? You get jumpy, So again,
and the comment about the severity, like one of the victim having more severe wounds, I'm not sure what the word severe means. I don't know if there were more more stab wounds on that victim than the other one, or if the wounds just appeared more severe. And so, with stab wounds, it's just a line in the skin. With a cut, you can go all the way across the body and they can gape open. So it makes it look like it's more severe in appearance. So maybe that's where that's coming from. So I don't know what the word severe means, what they're referring to.
I'm going to play just a little clip for this, Doc, for the severe wounds, because the father of one of the victims, Kaylee's dad, Steve, makes mention of it here. And this is an old clip. So for those of you in the chat, again, this is old information. Lou Lamaracco, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says Forensic Fridays are fascinating with Dr. Eason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, we both thank you so much. So let me let this roll for a minute.
Idaho students Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle were brutally stabbed to death in their shared off-campus home. 2 female roommates sleeping on the bottom floor of the house were not injured. This comes as the father of Gonsalves is alleging new details on how some of the victims were killed. Stephen Gonsalves telling Fox News Digital that he had spoken to the coroner who said the victims had big open wounds, adding that.
Now he's saying he spoke to the coroner, not to the medical examiner's office.
Okay.
And again, this is early on, so trying to look for a date on this, but I'll look at it after we're done. Again, I don't see a date here, but I'm sure in this YouTube video I'll be able to get the date. But let's let the rest of this play, because he goes into some details about the wounds and so forth.
Victims had big open wounds, adding this was a strong weapon, not like a stab. Gonsalves also said the coroner told him his daughter's injuries definitely did not match the wounds of fellow victim Madison Mogan, who was killed in the same bed, and that it was the work of a strong individual. It's been a month since that tragic night when students learned the magnitude of the horrific crime within hours.
When I first read this text message, I could not believe that there were 4 people reported.
3 days after the killings, police said,
based on details of the scene, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
Authorities have never revealed why they believe the attack was targeted, later telling NBC's Morgan Chesky it's possible the house, not necessarily the individuals living there, was targeted.
In the investigation, we have not really come to a conclusion whether it was the individual.
So this is old information. This is all kind of outdated. So just disregard that, folks in the chat. I just wanted to play that really for the open wounds and so forth. What was your take on that, Doc?
I don't quite understand what that means. How the wounds look different on one body than the other. I'm not sure. The only thing I can think of with the gaping wounds comment, it just sounds to me like some of them were cuts.
Right.
As opposed to stab wounds. And maybe one had more cuts on the body than the other one, and it appeared more severe. I don't know.
I'll be honest with you, Doc. When I first heard that, what my takeaway was from that is that what the father was trying to say is that his daughter was more brutally attacked by this assailant. And that's what I was getting from that. And I could have been wrong. That was my perception of it. I perceived that as him saying, the others were killed and stabbed maybe multiple times, but my daughter was like brutally slain.
Like overkill.
Yeah. Overkill. And it didn't say anything where, you'd see the neck cut or, I didn't want to go into it. I don't want to, trigger more people in the chat to getting upset here. But the way I took it, it was just that his message there in that piece was that, my daughter was the subject of this attack and the rest of them were all collateral damage. Let me know what you guys think in the chat. There's 1,300 people here watching still. Blondie 1025, a great friend from the great state of New Jersey. She says, how long does a typical autopsy take, Dr. Eason? And that's a question that many ask here.
It depends on the case. So if you got like a 50-year-old who has high blood pressure and high cholesterol and drops dead at Walmart and the body comes in, I could probably get that case done in about 45 minutes to an hour. If you have a multiple gunshot wound case, somebody shot 5 times in the chest, that's going to take at least 2, maybe 3 hours. So it just depends on the case.
So it varies. Yeah, it varies depending on what's presented before you, right?
Right. That's right.
Understood. All right, let's look at the chat just a little bit more, and then we'll wrap it up because we're all close to the hour. I promised the doc an hour, and his overtime rate is, I don't even want to tell you guys what it is. It's a lot. It's a lot of money, and I don't think we can afford it. Cheated no more. And I wanted to say quickly, thank God for Post-it notes. Kathy Black Rose 11, she celebrated her 29th birthday today. So Kathy, well, actually she's in her 70s, but I won't say the exact age because if you tell a woman's age, you get in big trouble. But happy birthday to you, Black Rose 11. She's a moderator, a great friend, a supporter here on Crime Time with DutyRon in California. Happy birthday, Kathy. We love you and wishing you many more healthy and happy ones. Let's see. Let's scan the chat. You know, I was gonna take one caller. Does somebody want to call in and ask the doc a question live? And we have to keep it obviously on topic. Keep it on to this case because the doc has, you know, he's well versed in the case. He got himself up to speed on it. Let's share in the chat, Doc. We'll take one caller, one live caller, because I like to do this. It's always great to connect with the audience. So let's see if there's one brave person out of the 1,310 people that are watching here. Keep it on point to this case, and again, we'd love to take your questions and your comments in the chat. People are saying happy birthday to Kathy. I hope she's here, or if she's not, I hope she watches the replay. I know she will. Here's Chanel saying thank you, Dr. Eason.
Oh, you're welcome.
I didn't see any
Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always ask my guests, will you be brave enough to come back?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, we would love to have you back. You know, I communicated with Doc. You know, he just graduated into the 50 and over club. So congratulations to you for making it into the big 5-0, right? You're
right.
You're in there. So I've been communicating with the doc for a little bit and back and forth on our professional profiles on LinkedIn. I'm going to, if it's okay with you, I'm going to link all of your social media. Unfortunately, you're going to probably get blown up with questions on there, but I'm going to link your LinkedIn, and you got Facebook, and do you have Instagram? I think
I do.
Okay, Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, and LinkedIn. I'll put it all in the description so you guys can get a hold of the great doctor. He takes the questions there. What about $1,875 a question? So be careful with the questions. You know, use it sparingly. You know, just kidding, guys. 50 is the new 30, says Amy. Amy,
right.
yeah, I'll roll with that. Marietta says thank you, doctor. A lot of thank yous coming into the chat.
Oh, good.
Let me know in the comments section what you thought of our guest tonight. We're live streaming on Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh, I think we're also on Twitch tonight. We're twitching on Twitch. So that's a good thing. So Mustang Sally has a good question, but I can't see it because the chat's rolling by too fast. All right. Sandra says the doctor is awesome. I agree 100%. I think we covered it all here tonight, Doc, and there was no takers. There's too many scaredy cats out there. Nobody wants to come on and talk to us. So Sharon Creates says great education tonight. Thank you for that. And if you did get something from this, let us know by leaving us a comment. Make sure you follow me and Ed Wallace, all things DutyRon, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and against Ed Wallace's best wishes, we are on TikTok. But we're not dancing on a pole on TikTok. We only upload all of our educational live streams on there. So if you want to check us out on TikTok, definitely go over there and check it out. I think I saw a question that was good in the chat here. Talking about lividity on the deceased at the crime scene. Anybody know? So yeah, that's a question. Thank you for that, Greg. Doc, I wanted to ask you this because I forgot. It's alleged that these 4 remains were 8+ hours at that crime scene. Okay, stab wounds, 8+ hours. Some we heard the coroner say they were all in bed, but now we're finding out that some were on the floor, some were not in the bed. Can you talk about what happens to a body when you have these stab wounds, multiple stab wounds, as we know from here. We saw blood dripping outside the foundation of this home, in the backside of the home. Ed Wallace, who's a crime scene expert, he's in processed over 2,500 murder scenes in his time as a crime scene detective. He looked at that and saw the blood on the outside of the house and said, "Hey, I know what blood looks like. This is blood." Can you talk about what happens with 8 hours when a body remains inside a home and obviously heated? It's not in freezing cold. It's not in tremendous heat, but 60, 70 degree temperatures, 8+ hours. What do you got going on there?
Yeah, so that's part of the postmortem changes. I saw lividity mentioned in one of the comments. And so when death occurs, over time, all the muscles in the body are going to get stiff, and it's going to be different for each individual. It's just going to take hours for it to occur. They will become stiff, and then they will eventually become flaccid again. That's called rigor mortis or rigor mortis. And then lividity, when the heart stops beating, the blood is going to settle towards gravity. So if you're found face down, the front of your body is going to look purple or purple red, and that's from the lividity. But in this stab wound case, I would not be surprised if there was no lividity, because all the blood was gone from the bodies. And so in stab wound cases where a lot of blood is lost, sometimes you won't see lividity. The thing with lividity is that if you press your finger on it for the first 8 to 12 hours, it'll blanch, and then the blood will return. But after a time, it'll become fixed. And so that's when you press on the lividity and it won't blanch at all. They were trying to use that a while back to try and determine time of death, but there's just so many variations in it that we really can't use it that much anymore. Same thing with rigor mortis. So if you are very muscular, or die in a warm environment, or you engage in a lot of physical activity before death, which is probably what happened in this case, then the rigor mortis, the rigor is going to occur much quicker, and it's going to go away a whole lot quicker too. So that's why you really just can't use lividity or rigor mortis to determine time of death.
Right. And, some folks in the chat are asking, who is the authority on the time of death? And in my experience here in New York, we would get onto a scene, and EMS was called, and the ambulance comes, the EMS on the scene, they would call the time of death. They would, they were there, a paramedic would come, and they would listen with the stethoscope and check for any vitals after they were done doing their, basic life support.
Well, what I've started doing on my death certificates, I started doing this in Chicago, is when I put time of death on the death certificate or on my autopsy report, that's the time they were pronounced dead or declared dead. It doesn't necessarily mean that's the time they actually died.
Right.
Because that is the one bit of information that is actually true and correct. There's going to be a time that everyone is going to be pronounced dead. All right. But that may not necessarily be the time of death.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Gotcha.
And I've been putting that on my death certificates. I think in Atlanta, I was allowed to put unknown for the time of death, and that saved me a lot of problems, a lot of phone calls from family members wanting to know the exact time of death. And
now, does that get sticky if there's a trial when you have unknown time of death?
I think there's maybe one case in which the prosecution wanted me to nail down the time of death, and I told them I can't do it. I'm sorry. It's basically like I said, the best way to determine time of death, when they were last known alive, when they were found dead, and they died somewhere in between. And there just really is no way to kind of narrow it down even further based on findings from autopsy, unlike they do on CSI.
Right. Those shows are.
I haven't watched that show in years.
Doc, I think in this case, what I discussed with you before we went live, they used a combination of the girls using their cell phones and being on social media and text messaging, and then now we found out through the probable cause affidavit that they have video of the perpetrator coming in and exiting the home. It was like I think 9 minutes or 11 minutes. Don't crucify me if I don't have these times right, chat. But it was in a very short period of time. He was in and out, and that's how they determine, I believe, time of death.
So time of death is based on circumstances. Other information,
investigative tools.
You won't get time of death from the autopsy. You'll get it from like text messages and stuff like that.
Right. Yes. People are asking about stomach contents and so forth.
No.
This narrow time or give
No.
No. All right. So Heather Whatever, look at Heather Whatever. Wow. All right, Kristen, you're in. We have one brave soul that called in, Doc. Kristen, you give me the thumbs up, I'll add you. All right, here she is. Kristen is in the building. Unpack a lot of hold on. Okay, there you go. It's a family channel. Chris, what do you got for the doc?
I don't know. Can you guys hear me all right? I'm wearing this thing today.
Yeah, it looks like you got earmuffs on.
Well, I always wear my ears because, receding hairline, plus I live in the tundra. It's always cold.
I know all right. Receding hairlines. I know all of them.
Well, but it's okay for you. It's not okay for me.
You're okay.
Doc Eason, thank you so much for coming in. Love how professional you are. It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Couple of things, and just more in relation to people are asking about how you tell time of death. So if you were looking at just maybe this wasn't a stabbing, would you look at liver temperature? Do you look at body temperature? Do you look at, any of the things maybe that's been classified in movies and stuff like that? Does that matter?
No. So in all the forensic textbooks, you have this formula in there that says that when death occurs, the body will cool at a rate of about 1.5 degrees per hour. Okay, on average. All right. The keyword there is average. All right. So here's the problem. What was the starting point when the death occurred? Because the normal body temperature is 98.6, but a lot of people are running around at 99, at 98.2. I think every time I got checked for COVID, it was like 98.7 or something like that. I don't know. So you don't have a place to start from with that formula. And the other problem with that formula is that it's an average. The other issue is that when we do the autopsies, we don't take a liver temperature because probably they've been in the cooler the night before. And so that just totally disrupts, adds all these factors in that will disrupt the measurement. So that's why we don't do it.
So in cases where, that's maybe what the public thinks, is there ever an opportunity that you have as a doctor to educate people on this? Or, do you get those kind of questions often? I'm just curious what, you as in your profession, what does people perceive, what you do? It's always interesting.
Yeah, so I get that question a lot. Like when families call me up, they have the autopsy report, they've gone through it. And the three most common things that get asked on the phone from the family are the three things that I can't answer with any certainty. So the first one is time of death, and we'll go through the whole conversation about how it's impossible, we can't do it, go through the formulas with them and explain that. The second one is how many pills did he take? That's something I can't do because I don't know when he started taking the pills, and I don't know the dose of the pills. I don't know if he took 3 at 2 a.m. and then took another 5 at 6 a.m. I didn't know if he took them all at once. The third one is, did he suffer when the death occurred? I wasn't there. I don't know. So those are the three main questions that I get asked all the time, and I can't answer any of them with any kind of certainty. And there has been some disappointment on the other line.
I can imagine. I bet what you do is extremely challenging. So thank you for all you do there too.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Kristen, thank you so much for coming up here tonight with us. We really appreciate it. You were the brave one.
You said everybody was a chicken, and me, I considered that challenge accepted. So
I hooked you. I love it.
Every time. All right.
Excellent.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. So there she goes. Docs, I want to just say again, on behalf of the entire community, all the folks here on Crime Time with DutyRon, we say thank you to you for spending a whole hour and 15 minutes of your time here on a Friday night. You are super, super awesome, and I greatly appreciate you, brother. Will you come back again sometime?
Yes, absolutely.
We want to talk about the Murdoch case. What do you think about that?
Hey, that's an hour and a half away from where I live, so I need to start watching it. I haven't paid much attention to it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah,
but I can watch the stuff that I think you sent me the testimony from the medical pathologist. I watched part of it. I actually watched the defense cross-exam first, and that looked pretty tough to me. So I'm gonna watch them all in full and just kind of
We'll make it
we
easy.
Can discuss it further.
We'll just cover the forensics part of it with Ed and I, and then with you, we'll just cover the medical examiner's side.
Oh yeah,
and we can condense it. We can make it, condense, and we can answer some great questions for the folks.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be something we could do in the future. And now I feel like we almost have a resident forensic pathologist on board here with us. So.
I can be the one.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Hey, guys and girls, I want to say thank you to the replay viewers. Thank you to everyone who subscribes. Please right now, if you guys are all here, consider hitting the thumbs up and subscribing to Crime Time with DutyRon. Follow us on all things social media, one word, DutyRon. And again, when we go live, you'll get the notifications if you choose to receive notifications on your YouTube channel. Again, thank you, Doc. I want to just say, as I always end all of these, it's about the crime victims. Zaina, Ethan, Kaylee, and Madison. This is what we're doing these educational live streams because we want to respect the victims and their families. And I encourage all of you folks to send these folks prayers and positive vibes. Don't dog them. Don't down them. Don't be that person and go out there. There's so much bullying that goes on in this world, and so many people, do such horrible things. Don't be that person. Lift these families up, because you would never want to be in the position that they're in right now. So that's the message that I want to send out to the 1,400 folks that are watching this live now. On behalf of Crime Time with DutyRon and Dr. Eason, we say thank you for tuning in. Good night from New York and South Carolina. Thank you, Doc. And if you hang around to the end, I want to just talk to you real quick.
Okay.
Doc. All right. Peace and love from Crime Time with DutyRon and the Doc, the big Doc in the house. Go Tigers. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes.